here. Thank you, Shadia, for giving us the disclosure. So again, this meeting is recorded. For folks joining live today, we welcome you all and thanks for joining. For folks that are watching this at a later date, thank you again for watching. Again, I was saying we kind of have a full agenda today. So let's get into the next slide. So for folks that are new to this space, we just want to briefly go over our meeting logistics. And for some of you, this may be review, so welcome back. But I want to share that on the left side, you will see the icon that is associated with the description. So if you would like to turn up your volume, please use the audio button, which looks like a little speaker if you want to raise or lower your volume. Everyone is muted upon entry today, so if you would like to speak, you'll just need to come off mute. Even though we've been practicing this for over 3 years, I still sometimes am muted. So just a friendly reminder to take yourself off mute if you like to speak. We will be utilizing the chat box feature. Feel free to ask questions in the chat as I will be monitoring them. If you have comments, response, questions, if you want to engage with other folks in this space, we encourage you to do so. We do have the video option. If you'd like to come off camera, we welcome that. But by all means, you have full autonomy and agency to make your own choice if you'd like to be on camera, or maybe you just want to be on camera when you're speaking. I will say sometimes when we have a larger crowd that the video can reduce bandwidth. So maybe turn it on if you're speaking, if you like to, or you can keep it off. We will be utilizing the raise hand function. Folks will be called on in the order received. However, I will invoke facilitator's privilege. If someone has been speaking maybe more than someone else, we want to give other people the opportunity. So for the most part, we will call on folks in the order received, but there may be a time where I may call on someone else who hasn't been heard yet. We've also enabled the closed caption for accessibility. So if you are looking at that, you can turn them on or you can hide them. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, one moment. And also, if you are seeking or need help with technical assistance, you can reach out to my colleague. His name is Joe Boyles, also known as PGE IT Guy, and he can assist you if you're having some challenges, and he'll take you in our breakout room, or you can message him directly if you need assistance. So we'll move on to the next slide. Again, here are our operating agreements for folks who are new. We established these norms to help create a safe space to practice diversity of thought and be more inclusive. We just want to have some guidelines to ensure that everyone feels comfortable participating in this space. I want to encourage folks to practice curiosity and seek to understand different perspectives. So we have 5 agreements, and one is stay engaged. We ask that folks stay engaged throughout the conversation today. By all means, though, if you need to take a break, feel free to do so. But when you come back, just be fully engaged. And we know that it's easy to check out and multitask, but we just want to ask folks to be present in the conversation. The second agreement is be willing to experience some discomfort. So some of the conversations may be more difficult for some folks, especially when we're talking about like inequities or racism or sometimes financial. These can all trigger some folks to experience a little bit of discomfort, but we're going to ask that you sit through that and just understand that you may not agree with everyone's perspective or point of view, but just giving the respect that allows folks to be heard, which kind of goes right next into our third agreement of speaking your truth. We really value lived experience here, not just like professional. So like speaking your truth, we want folks to be able to understand where folks are coming from and giving folks the respect and honoring what folks' lived experience is. Again, like I said, we have a pretty heavy agenda-ish or topics. So expect and accept non-closure. So some presenters segment may invoke more conversation and may take up more time. So we may not be able to get through everything today. We also may not be able to solve. So this is more of a conversation. That's what the Learning Labs are about. We love dialogue here, and we love the organic experience that comes in this space. So just want to give that to manage folks' expectations that we may not be able to get to everything today. And then we want to ask folks to share the airtime. Again, we want to give space to those who have not been able to speak maybe. So again, not to say you cannot speak many times, but I may call on some folks that haven't been, haven't spoken yet. So doesn't mean that we don't all want to hear you, but just want to balance the space. So if folks are in agreement and or understand, we would ask, and you can touch your emoji reaction button, place a thumbs up. The reaction icon is in the bottom right-hand corner. I see some thumbs up. All right, next slide. So here are today's meeting objectives or learning objectives in some of these spaces. So when you all walk away today, we're hoping that you will learn more about the flexible load and its intersections with customers, communities, and markets. We are leading a conversation about our community-based renewable energy project. And so we hope when you leave this lab today, you'll be able to have more information and maybe share this out with your broader communities. And then we are going to share our timelines and next steps. So those are kind of our learning and meeting objectives for today. Next slide. Again, here is our agenda. So we are in the first part. As you see, I've gone over already, so we're a little behind, but it's all good, right? So we will talk about the flexible load multi-year plan, which will be presented by Katie Harper. And then we will move into the flexible load customer journey, which will be presented by Ben Liu. And then we'll have a special presentation by the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, which will be by Jeff Harris. And then we will take a break, and then we'll move into our CBRE, also known as Community-Based Renewable Energy discussion, which will be a discussion piece led by Jacob Goodspeed. And then we will have Kai close us out. Next slide, please. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first presenter today, who is Katie Harper, who's going to discuss, again, the flexible load multi-year plan update.
Hello, good morning. Katie Harper. I oversee the Customer Flex Load Program implementation team. They're responsible for the delivery of the 7 flexible load pilots that we have in market today. This is kind of a new audience for me, so I just want to make sure, to share what we work on, which is residential smart thermostats, peak time rebates, time of day, got ResEV smart charging, and we have our large C&I Energy Partner Schedule 26. We have our multifamily water heaters, and we have our commercial thermostats. So I'm here today to talk about our 2023 flexible load multi-year plan filing. But I think before we go too much further, just to anchor on what is flexible load, and we talk about it as a concept where customers modify their energy usage in response to grid needs. This includes demand response. So you hear demand response a lot, and we kind of put that in the flex load area. It provides that alternative to traditional power, and it connects to our decarb goals. I did see Jason's hand up for a moment. I don't know if you want to jump in here.
No, I was just going to ask the question as to whether or not there are members of the audience would like us to explain what flex load is and what a peak time rebate is and what a thermostat program might be.
I think that would be good, just if we could just give a very tiny level set. If you have the time, Katie, to do that just really quick.
Yeah, so I mean, happy to do that. I'm a very detailed person. So let's, for residential, with peak time rebates, we may send a notification out, and customers respond by changing the way that they use their energy during certain hours when it's, to alleviate some pressure from the grid. And there's incentive programs that you enroll in. Thermostats is a very popular and common one where we would reduce the thermostat by a couple degrees during that peak time, and then it would return. And so I think that's that overall concept of customers enroll in these programs, and there's an incentive to change their usage at those times. We do that with commercial and industrial as well. I can go into more detail, but I think in the interest of time, we would need to move through the flexible load plan pretty quickly.
I think that's a good baseline, and if folks have questions, you can ask them in the chat, but I think that's was a good example of how that program works.
Excellent, thank you. So I think with that, if we could move to the next slide, the three takeaways here for today are, why do we do a flexible load plan? When do we do it? And where are we at today with our filing? So we'll go through kind of the purpose it serves, its history, where it sits in context with all of our landscape of planning and those filings that we have out there. And then our next steps for our 2023 multi-year plan filing. So if you could go to the next slide, it's a pretty quick overview. So our multi-year plan is intended to be our holistic view of our PGE's flexible load activities. It's all together in one place, and it serves a number of purposes. So the 5 purposes this serves are, provides that comprehensive view of our activities. It's stakeholder engagement. It links to our decarbonization strategy. It provides that 2-year overview of our activities, annual targets, and budget forecast. It demonstrates our progress from demonstration of pilot to program, and how we resource it, some of the challenges and changes we need to make to our practices along the way. It also is a vehicle that we bring forward new pilots for approval. It has a rigorous engagement upstream before it makes it into the multi-year plan. And then in addition, we bring forward informs, which are introduction of early concepts that are on our development roadmap. And most of these are what we really bring to, we called it Flash, and now we're in the learning lab setting. So we bring these here for discussion, as you'll see later today. Similar. So with that, most of the things that end up in the multi-year plan are something that have already been discussed in these settings. So with that, I think the next slide, please. So the origin story of the filing is, it came out of the 2019 IRP process. There was a need to see all of the flex load activities in one place. And so PGE filed the 2020 flex load plan. It was our first filing that really showcased our operating model in detail, as well as proposing taking these individual pilots that were having their own journey through the system of filings and put it in a portfolio view so it could be seen all together. It also laid out a pathway where we take demonstrations, we develop them into pilots, and then we take these pilots and we develop them into programs. It put forth that we would file a multi-year plan every 2 years upon acceptance. It was accepted, and so in 2021, we filed our first multi-year plan. And this moved us to a 2-year portfolio planning and budget cycle. It consolidated 4 of our 6 pilots, and it included the smart grid test bed under one deferral. So with our 2023, this will be our second 2-year planning. And at this time, we're looking at maturing pilots, those pilots in design I mentioned, potentially a few informs and some regional engagement activity. And I'll talk about next steps with that filing, which is one of the key takeaways from today. So we can move to the next slide. The multi-year plan origin story links directly to the 2019 IRP. Since then, there's been House Bill 2021's come into play, and there's new plans that have entered the landscape. First with our DSP, or our distribution system plan, which was filed in 2 parts in 2021 and 2022. And then our latest clean energy plan, which is combined with our IRP that was filed in March of this year. So I found this visual to be incredibly helpful to anchor on the connection of the CEP IRP to our DSP, but then also how it flows down to our multi-year plan and our transportation electrification plan. I do want to stop here for a moment and just see if there are any questions. It's a lot to take in.
Looks like we have a question from Nastasia. Smith?
Yes, it's Natasha.
Oh, Natasha, sorry.
Just trying to make sure I'm reading this correctly. So the DSP plan flows into the clean energy plan and IRP, which then kind of flows back into DSP.
Yeah, so the CEP IRP lays out that roadmap for our clean energy transition and our long-term resource planning. And then the distribution plan informs that IRP analysis of system needs and preferred resourcing options. Under that is the adopter model that gets leveraged for both of these. And it also flows down into the multi-year plan and the transportation electrification plan. So our goals map to these, but are looked at in 2-year chunks.
Thank you.
So we can move to the next slide, which is really about, here's the context, and this brings us here, which is, per request from commission staff, PGE we're planning to defer the 2023 filing date. We'll be filing a motion to modify the 2021 plan, which says that we will file the 2023 in December of this year. So this motion will extend it into next year. The second thing is we'll be coordinating with commission staff on approval and authorization of our 2024 budget and activities. This will allow us to continue to procure flex load multi megawatts and in pursuit of the IRP goals. And the third is to leverage these meeting formats to inform on our activities, as well as to, we want to revise the format of the multi-year plan into a shorter, more digestible, approachable filing. So I think I helped make up any time, Samantha. So that's the conclusion. And so I want to make sure there's also, if there's any questions about this, to hold some space.
Sure. I don't see any questions in the chat yet, but if folks have questions, you can raise your hand or put them in the chat. Well, folks may be processing this information as it's a little more compliance. So I don't think I see any questions now, but if you have questions later throughout today's lab, feel free to drop it in the chat or raise your hand. I believe folks will be on hand to answer any questions throughout today's lab.
Excellent.
Right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Katie. All right. So we didn't have any questions at this time regarding flex load. Katie's presentation, but now I'm going to pass it over to Ben Liu to talk about it more from the customer side of the, I guess, more customer centric, the journey. So I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Liu, and I am the Consumer Energy Solutions Manager here at PGE. One of the areas my team focuses on is scaling programs and services for residential customers. Today, we will be talking about flexible load customer journey and how it informs some upcoming work that we've been working on. Could we go to the next slide, please? So there's a new term that I'm going to be introducing. According to Gartner, the customer journey is a series of connected experiences that customers desire and need, whether that be completing a desired task or traversing the end-to-end journey from prospect to customer to loyal advocate. Now, for today's conversation, we're talking about the end-to-end customer experiences of researching, purchasing, installing, and enrolling grid-enabled products in preparation to participate in PGE's flexible load programs. Those experiences threaded together become the customer journey. You know, unlike traditional power plants, customer experience is key to developing flexible load as a successful resource, because the individual engagement is needed with customers. Okay, next slide, please. So I only have two objectives today. The first is to present our proposal to improve the flexible load customer journey. And then the second is to gather input on those proposed improvements. So next slide, please. As many of you know, PGE is trying to balance our aggressive decarbonization goals while also planning for the increase in energy needs over the next decade. It became increasingly obvious that one lever that we could invest in was to increase participation in our flexible load programs. Now, we're very fortunate. We already have several pilots and programs in market at varying stages of maturity. Right now, with the overall flexible load portfolio, we're at the tail end of the early adopter segment. So as we looked at the adoption curve, we realized that the required experiences for the majority, they're very different than what we've built for our current participants, those early adopters, those innovators. There needed to be more education and support. So we started to dig in to better understand the needs and friction points of the majority segment. The research that we have done the last few years was a mix of white papers, conversations with community advocates, surveys, and focus groups. Next slide, please.
Ben, really quick, can you explain what white paper is?
Oh, yeah, so a white paper is usually, I might, so from my point of view, right, and a white paper is usually an industry paper that is done by either a consultant or a utility, somebody in that industry, and they come in a couple different forms. So sometimes they'll do a meta-analysis, so they'll look at other white papers and they kind of analyze all of the things that have happened for that particular topic, or sometimes they're kind of a first-hand look at this is how we did something, and these are the lessons learned. Yeah, thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
Could you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so from all of this research, we were able to identify the customer problem statement, you know, how customers learn, acquire, install, and enroll grid-enabled devices. It's confusing and it's overwhelming. There's various friction points that prevent them from taking part in the clean energy future. You know, I'm actually kind of excited that we landed this succinctly because it's actually quite a large problem to be able to say out loud, right? Shadia, would you mind opening the poll for this question? So thank you, everybody. I'm asking you to be a guinea pig in our polls for the Learning Lab, but if you could take a moment and let us know, you know, do you agree with our problem statement? Are we getting it right? So I think, can we move to the next slide while the
Why the poll is going? It looks like
Yeah.
the majority are saying yes, and some are unsure.
Okay,
Let's give people a couple more seconds to reply. I think there's
sorry.
yeah.
Sorry, everybody. This is my first time doing a poll in a learning lab, so thank you for being my guinea pig.
Oh, they're fun. I like them because it creates a more interactive experience for our learners, and we can close it. It's at a minute now. There is a, so it looks like the results were 71% said yes, 3% said no, and 26% said unsure.
Oh, interesting.
And maybe unsure is, I'm curious to know, like, if anyone wanted to speak, is it because, does the problem statement make sense, or are you seeking more detail? I don't know if we want to open that up for discussion, or if someone will want to share why they said unsure, might be helpful. Well, we have a shy bunch, maybe.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Hopefully.
Or they're maybe processing, like, I don't know, maybe it just doesn't make sense.
Oh, yeah.
Someone said they're new to the field or the industry, so maybe they don't have enough information to make an informed decision on, like, the poll.
Yeah, and that's okay. That's okay too, right? Like, over the course of our conversation in the next little bit, hopefully it'll become a little bit more obvious. So if we could go to the next slide, thank you. So then we started talking to folks, right, about how we could go about solving the problem. But first we wanted to identify what our North Star should be. Really, at the end of the day, we wanted to empower customers to enable flexible load. So how do we help them feel empowered? When we talked to customer advocates and community members, we were able to categorize in their recommendations into 4 buckets. You know, the first one is clear information that is relevant to me. We got a lot of like, hey, PG, don't talk to me about home improvement actions when you know I'm a renter. Yeah, obvious. Okay, thank you. We need to get better at doing that. Second one is provide various options, price points, tips to save. I heard a lot of PGE, you got to recognize that those grid enabled products, they're expensive. What are my options if I'm not made of money? Okay. The third one is ways to get that information faster to save time. Like, hey, PGE, that information, it needs to come in simple so I can make those decisions quickly. Yes. And then integrate solutions to optimize across products and services. We heard a lot of like, so you're going to help me install those products. Are you going to help me enroll in those programs? Right? Like those are the 4 buckets that we really heard and that we want to ground into. If you're part of the DSP sessions last year, these categories should be pretty familiar. We took these recommendations to heart and they informed our design principles. So if we could.
Arlene has her hand up.
Oh, hi.
There, I should be off mute now.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, I'm getting the feeling that you've got 2 big issues or 2 big topics going on for customers that you're trying to teach them about flex load and energy efficiency at the same time. Heat pumps, other things you can buy to increase your energy efficiency. It sounds like that the customers might be addressing both of these topics for the first time. Am I on the right track there?
Yeah, it could be. It depends on what product they're looking into. So I think in your example, a heat pump is a really great one. A heat pump is it has the ability to be energy efficient, right? If you talk to NEEA, ETO, the region itself has done a great job of introducing the energy efficiency of heat pumps. And then when a heat pump, a ducted heat pump is paired with a smart thermostat, it has flex load capabilities. So it's almost a twofer. But you're right, it is something that we're working to educate customers on, because not all products have an energy efficiency element, and not all products have a flex load capability. Did that answer your question?
My comment is just that it seems like a lot to be educating people about. Both energy efficiency and all of those appliances, that's a lot. And the whole flex load concept is also a lot. So,
Yes.
thank you, yes.
Yes, it is, I agree. And then in the chat, there was a request to restate what grid-enabled products meant. So there are the products like an EV charger or a heat pump, or a heat pump, battery, solar. Those are, we call it grid-enabled when they have the capability to connect into our grid. So a lot of what Katie Harper had talked about for the flexible load programs, like, are those products able to connect into the program so that when PGE has a grid need, we could call upon it? Not every product has that capability. So you might see someone talk about a level 2 charger for EVs, and one might be grid enabled and one might not. And it's really centered around, does it have the capabilities and the components to allow us to talk to it? Elise, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay. So if we could go to the next slide.
So Ben, when
Oh,
an
yeah.
example, sorry, I know you said that, but maybe more. So if I have a smart thermostat, we call an event, we could tap into that, which would help the grid, right?
Yeah,
Like
because
up, like raising their air conditioner temperature from like 72 to 76, like in an event. That's like an event where that device is enabled and we can tap into it, right? Like a smart thermostat.
yeah, it's actually even before that, right? So
Oh,
when
before that.
when we talked about grid enablement, Sam, what you described is how we talk about it, that's a grid connected. So we've
Okay.
already connected to you. We've done all of the things to have integrated that device into our system, and the customer has agreed to be part of the program. So that it's a two-parter in that piece. Now, grid enablement is before that, right? When you're standing at the store, is that product able to be part of that program or not? Does it have those capabilities? It's even before it. Oh, sorry, there's a yeah, so I guess Philip is right in what he stated in the chat. Every appliance connected to the electrical system is grid enabled in a way. What we're really talking about is the utility controllable.
Okay, thank you. I'm also learning.
Yeah, no, that's great. Great
I'm 1
question.
year in and I have a little bit of knowledge, so I'm trying to facilitate from behalf of the learner who may know less.
Love it.
I am
Love
learning it. So thank you, y'all.
Yeah. Okay, so from those recommendations and our research, we were able to ground into our design principles into 3 categories. So the first one is educational, broadly used, efficient, empowered, capabilities from within the community. So we're going to start on the left with education broadly used. So our principles for this category are centered on being clear and simplifying the information. I personally like to use my family as a litmus test here. Could my parents, who are first-generation immigrants, who also learned English as an adults, understand what's being presented? You know, could I, as a child in the 5th grade, translate and explain what is being presented? That's the lens that we've applied to this first bucket. Give you the relevant information and communicate it in a way that's simple enough that someone with basic English could understand. Now, the second category, efficient, empowered, centers around ensuring the customers feel empowered about their installation needs and costs required, so they can budget appropriately. We want customers to feel like they can have the conversation with the installer and are confident they know what is being sold to them, while also understanding the available incentives, rebates, tax credits, and processes to get them. Now, the last category, the capabilities from within the community, customers let us know that they wanted to connect with local businesses. So we're going to lean into local. These are the design principles that we are grounded in our next phase of work. So I'm going to just pause there for a second. Are there any questions on the design principles? Okay. So if I could go to the next slide, please. So with those design principles in mind, we think that a solution is to provide information and tailor it to meet the customer's needs. Shadia, could you please open the poll for this question? I'm curious to see if folks agree with the design principles and the proposed solution. And we'll just take a moment here.
It is fun to watch the poll. I
I think only you could see. I don't think I could see it on my side.
know, I was like, oh, when I realized, I was like, let me share it. And if, I think folks know, but when you're done taking the poll, you can just X out of I think it closes the box for you, right? Keep it open like 13 more seconds. We give folks a minute. We actually,
So Janelle, I think I'm gonna, and apologies if I pronounce your name incorrectly, but I think we're gonna get a little bit more into that in a minute.
I just shared the poll results. So it's pretty close with folks are feeling, yes, it looks like the right approach, but then 40% are unsure.
Okay.
And then some said no, 1% or 3%, yes. So I'll
Yeah.
stop sharing these.
Yeah, I'm curious for if folks in the unsure camp, could you give me a little bit, like, is it unsure of our ability to do all of the things, or unsure of those are the things that should be part of our design principles?
I see Michelle's hand up.
Thanks, Samantha. This is Michelle from Oregon Public Utility Commission. So I was one of the folks that answered unsure, partly because I feel like I don't disagree with the principles, but I'd like to see how PGE interprets them. And I'm curious, to kind of see those to fruition before saying that, like, oh yeah, absolutely, this is the way to go. And then my other big piece is for the solution. I guess, again, I would need more clarity because I have some hesitation about the idea of providing tailored information to meet the customer's needs being limiting. And so not really giving the customer a kind of full menu of options and understanding, and just kind of like assuming that based on, PGE's perspectives on certain things, that this is the right thing for them.
Yeah.
And so I always kind of like the idea of one of those like flow chart decision tree type things where it's like a customer maybe can see all of the potential options available, but at the same time still maybe like walk themselves through the process and why. And so I just don't know necessarily that this solution would capture that without having the opportunity to see what it looks like.
Yeah, well, that's a great segue because we're gonna do a sample in just a moment, but I wanted to see does anybody else have any other comments?
Yes, and for folks that may have answered, if you feel comfortable sharing, maybe describing why you said unsure, that would be helpful. I do want to say, like, we're taking notes and this is feedback also. So it'd be really helpful if we could collect that today. But again, you can always email us if you want to think about it, and you can email us at our Learning Lab mailbox. But I see we have a couple hands up. I see Anjanette had a question in the chat first, so I will call on you, and you also have your hand up, and then I'll get to Philip.
Okay, I think what I was interested in is hearing more about how the initial, smaller launch went with the folks that they tried it with. What were some of the hiccups and what was done to fix those, or what is being brainstormed? Like, I think I just need to know more about what happened before uh to help me understand, like, moving forward.
Um, can I clarify your question? Are you talking about like the folks in the earlier past, like the innovators and the early adopters? Is that who you're
Yes,
talking
thank you. I couldn't remember what they
about? Yeah,
called them,
yeah.
but yes.
Yeah, so for every program, they all have their different flavors of experience, I guess, right? So how we talk to and engage the customers that were in the early parts of the EV program or the smart thermostat program were a little different. But just in general, a lot of those folks, just like in a characteristic, like those folks tend to be a little bit more independently knowledgeable about these like energy efficient products or new innovations in technology. So they're more receptive to it. Think back, it's like the folks that got the first EVs, right? Like they're kind of, in my mind, right? We call them super nerds, and we're one of them, right? Like we really enjoy understanding like the technology. The folks in that camp tend to are willing to take their families and be the guinea pigs to test that technology because they enjoy being the first, right? Now, that's a little different when we move into the majority, because those tend to be folks that, and I'm one of those, like, I like to wait and see. I like to wait and see if that technology is actually going to work. I like to wait and see if that technology is not going to cause me discomfort or have an impact to my family. And do I even understand it? That's kind of what we've noticed in how we've engaged with the innovators and early adopters. We can take a little bit more of a shortcut in conversation with them previously, and now we have to really be able to explain it and explain it in a way that people can get it without using a lot of technical jargon, to be honest. Yeah, did that help answer the question?
I think you gave more clarity to how the launch worked, but I don't think it really gave any information into what kind of hiccups there were, things that might need to be worked out.
Okay. So if you wouldn't mind, could I actually pause on that piece? Because I think in the when we go through the sample, I think that's when we'll
Okay, great.
be able to
Thank
answer
you.
some of the question. Yeah. Samantha, was there anybody else that had their hand up?
You could probably take Philip.
Hi, Philip.
Yes.
Hey, thank you. I think you have a significant error in the way you describe communicating systems. Rather than using the term grid enabled, which is extremely confusing because everything is connected to the grid if it uses electricity.
Sure.
Because the difference between what we regularly do and what you're trying to accomplish is a communication system that allows you to control some processes when there is a shortage of electricity. So using the word communicating appliance or something like that would be a whole lot more descriptive, and I think easier for people to understand.
Okay.
The other, we may be so far down the path that you have to use a very technical term that is misleading and you're stuck with it. That might be, but if you're not stuck with it, please fix it.
Okay.
The other comment I have is that one of the things that I think you need to do with people who are not, what did you describe us nerds, is they have to understand why you want to do this. I mean, I think I can describe it in a sentence or two, that you're trying to figure out how to avoid putting in a whole lot more capacity, both in generation and in distribution, by reducing peak loads. I'm not sure how you say that in a way that people who aren't nerds understand it, but I think it's important for them to understand, why does the utility want to do this? In addition to, how do I do it?
That's
And
right.
and how it saves me money. I hope you can do that in a sentence or two, but I think that's really, really important for ordinary folks to say, oh, you mean I can actually have an input, a way of helping so that we don't have brownouts in the future, a way that makes it possible for the utility not to raise my kilowatt hour charge because they had to put in a whole bunch of new wires or new generating plants. I mean, I think, that is the other half of explaining to people why they ought to be interested.
That's right. Everything you said, Philip, is exactly on point. Right. And I think a lot of that is how do we modify our marketing communication to say those things that you said? And we haven't gotten it right in this first round because it is a little too technical, and we acknowledge that. We're also testing a lot of that language with customers in various forums to see, can we get it down to the simplest terms? But I appreciate your comment, and we'll take that back, and we'll kind of continue to refine what we're doing. So if it's okay for folks, I like to continue on to get to the example, because I know I'm actually running over time. So let's just get started here. So let's walk through an example of how this plays out in some upcoming work. I'm going to preview a journey that we've been working on. Oh, wait, actually go back. Yeah, thank you. We're working on for the residential Res EV program, and those customers looking to install a charger and, if needed, a panel upgrade. We're expecting to release something like this at the end of this year. And we're going to walk through these 6 components of the experience individually. So if we could go to the next slide. So the first thing we want to be upfront about with folks is, what are they going to be doing in this journey? So in this example, it's broken down into the 3 easy steps. First, tell us a little bit about your home. Second, enroll in the program and see any instant rebates. Third, a contractor reaches out to give you a quote. Now, we want to make sure that we can reach our 2 largest communities, English speakers and Spanish speakers. That's why the content will be in both languages at launch. That's a lesson learned from earlier. We launched only in English, and that's something that we kind of want to rectify as we move forward through the adoption curve. We also plan on investing in short videos explaining things for those customers that are more auditory and visual learners. We're in the process of outlining all the educational content that is needed, but so far customers have told us they wanted education on level 1 charging versus level 2, what to consider when planning for an install, how do you know if you need a panel upgrade. Those are things that we've heard through the last couple of years of, hey, this is information that is still missing PGE. Please help us understand and get educated on it. Personally, I'm really excited about getting to use videos because we can utilize the closed caption and subtitle capabilities. It also helps us minimize additional investment going forward to be able to reach multiple languages. Okay, so if we go to the next slide. So how we plan to tailor the journey is really dependent upon what they self-select, right? So in this example, we know that some customers, they haven't purchased a charger yet, and they're just looking for help to buy that charger and get it installed. While others, they already purchased their charger and they only want to get connected to the installer. So they get the right experience for them based on what they self-selected. Okay. If we go to the next slide, while the customer is answering the assessment sections, we want to show them only relevant questions to them. So in this example, we're going to start with single family homeowners. What we've done is we've interviewed installers and found the common questions that a homeowner, a single family homeowner needs to answer to quickly determine the type of installation required and the estimated cost. We'll give them product recommendations, and if they need it, a pathway to purchase the equipment through the installer. Now, we also know that some customers, they're not comfortable with making any of those decisions and would prefer to get a recommendation directly from the installer. That's fine. We're going to give customers that option as well. Okay, if we could go to the next slide. So one of the things that we're really excited about being able to do is to help customers determine what program and rebates they qualify for. So for instance, in the smart charging program, there are different rebates that a customer can qualify for. By answering some basic questions like household number in your household, annual household income, we can direct them to the right rebate. And if they don't want to answer it, it's okay too, right? But the income eligible rebate is a good example of how do we target them, or not target them, but how do we direct them to the right journey? A customer can let us know all of those information, and we'll be able to qualify them for the income eligible rebate in real time. We're also excited that we get to leverage information we already have. So if a customer is already in our income qualified bill discount, so the IQBD program, which is centered around folks that are kind of lower income, they need help with their paying their bills. Their PG account already has the IQBD characteristic. We'll be able to bypass all the income validation questions and automatically show them the income eligible rebate. We can do this because we know that the IQBD thresholds, they're lower than the smart charging programs for income eligibility. Now, if a customer isn't enrolled already in IQBD, but they qualify and they've gone through this process, we can pass their information to the IQBD team and try to get them enrolled into that program. So it's kind of a seamless support for the customer. If we could go to the next slide. We're also threading through installation cost considerations. So we've heard from customers at various income levels that cost is very important. One of the ways that we help customers understand cost is by making them aware of the decisions that they can make that affect those costs. So for instance, when you install an EV charger, if you have the charger installed within 5 feet of the panel, your installation is considered a standard installation by the industry. Now, this is the most straightforward installation an installer can do, and it's the most affordable. Now, I didn't know that before I started this work, and I would have loved to know that information when I was getting my installer charger installed. And I'm in the industry, right? So like folks that are not in this industry, how would you know that? Now, these are the little details that give customers that quiet confidence needed when making a decision. And when people are confident, they're more likely to feel comfortable to move forward with the installation process, right? Can we go to the next slide? Now that customers have selected their journey, we give them cost estimation details. Now, we won't be able to do it for everything. We're starting with standard installations first, but we're working to help gain confidence to provide the cost ranges for those other common installation types. But customers wanted to know that, like, how do I know if what I'm getting quoted is a good number, right? Like and can I budget for it? So that way I don't have to do all of this legwork just to get to a point to realize that I can't afford it or I need to save up for it, right? Customers will also be able to see how the project is affected by their enrollment in the smart charging program and how the rebates affect total cost. So they'll be able to toggle and go, do I want to enroll? How does that change the cost? Do I want to enroll? And then they get more details on what is kind of the why. Why should you be in this program? How does it help you? How does it help the community? How does it help the grid, right? And since this particular product qualifies for the Inflation Reduction Act, those tax credits, we'll be able to provide some estimates of tax credits they could qualify for. Now, PG Legal has let us know we need to advise customers they got to talk to their personal tax accountant for their particular tax situation. But having that information stacked in a single place that's easy to read, that's super helpful for customers understand like which decision should I go after. So if we go to the next slide. So that's our sample journey, right? That's how we take the design principles we talked about earlier and how we're kind of applying it to a real life journey that we're working on today. This particular piece we're working on and we're hoping to launch it by the end of this year. Shadia, there should be a poll that's associated with this. Could you open that for folks? And I'm just, right, like in all of the things that we just talked about, like, do you think we're on track? Like, just curious.
Yes, folks are taking the poll. We'll leave it open another few seconds. Right, so there are the results. So it looks like, do you think PG is on the right track? 57% say yes, who took the poll, and 32% are unsure.
Yeah, so I would love to open it up to see for the folks that are unsure. I guess what is still left to be asked and answered.
And I love to create an organic experience here. That is what the Learning Lab is about. We want to have open dialogue, and that's what this space is for. But I do see a hand up with Pat first. I just wanted to, but if folks do want to share, we can drop our email in the chat, or you can put your comments in the chat of why you're feeling unsure. I just want to make sure we have time for our next presenter. So I'll call on Pat.
Yeah, I actually have a quick question because I think this is generally a well thought out program. But the biggest barrier for many customers is really going to be the upfront cost. And I wonder if PGE is considering a financing option for their customers so that they can basically make 3-year payments or something like that on these installations, especially the ones that are pricier, as a way to facilitate the implementation. I think that would be a huge benefit for many customers in order to help them proceed.
Yeah, Pat, are you going to be here for the next Learning Lab? Because
yes.
That is what we're going to be talking about in the next Learning Lab.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
We have a question in the chat, like, when is this launched?
So an end of year is when this is launching.
And it looks like they want to know if there was like an equity plan. I know you mentioned environmental justice communities. Is there a plan?
Yeah, so it's kind of a two-parter, if you will. So the first part is the integration of the IQBD, so the income qualified bill discount, that experience, but also in general, the PGE's transportation electrification team just kicked off some work to better understand our underserved communities as it relates to transportation electrification. So that work is happening. I think August through April of next year. And what our intent is that we'll be able to take the learnings that they've gathered talking to those underserved communities and put it back into the design of this. Did that answer the question?
Well, I do want to share, if folks have questions or want to provide feedback or comments, we have a few ways that you can engage. You can email us and we can drop that in the chat. And then we also have a web page where you can provide feedback and we can funnel it to the correct group and get a response for you. Can I see a show of hands? Do people need a break after all this information, or would you like to just push through? Maybe give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. If thumbs up, you need a break, or if you want to take it on your own, you can and just come back, or thumbs down if you are just ready to move through the next presenter. I know we're a little behind time, so sorry about that, but I just want to check in with the group. And there's a dog barking in the background. Thumbs up. Wait, that's PG. Thumbs up if you want a break. Yes, I need a break. Thumbs up, I need a break. Thumbs down if you just want to continue and maybe take your own break on your own as needed. I'm seeing some thumbs up, thumbs down. I'm seeing more thumbs down. So I guess we will leave it in your hands. If you need to take a break, go for it. We're going to continue to our next presenter.
Yeah.
And that was the majority. So thank you all. Sorry,
Yeah,
I wasn't able to pull up a poll fast enough, but yes, if you need to take your own break, please feel free to do so. But we're going to continue. Again, this is recorded. So we want to give a warm welcome to Jeff Harris, who is from NEEA, also known as Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, correct? He's going to present now for us on market transformation for end use load flexibility. And I'm going to assume you're going to tell us what end use load flexibility means and market transformation. So
yes, yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Can we just, I will just dive in. I know we're a little behind schedule, so I'll try to move a little quickly if I can. Next slide, please. So just a reminder of who the Alliance is. We are a 501c3 nonprofit funded by gas and electric utilities in the Northwest for the purpose of advancing market adoption of energy efficiency. You see the different funders here. Portland General Electric is currently funding NEEA through Energy Trust of Oregon. NEEA's core work for over 25 years now has been to advance, as I said, energy efficiency. But with the evolving needs of the power system here in the Northwest, the Alliance is continually improving our response to that grid need. And of course, now flexibility in timing of when energy efficiency shows up is a very important attribute of the core work that we do. And there's also the opportunity to make things not only more efficient and flexible, but also make them more responsive directly to grid integration and grid control. So let's go to the next slide. In fact, let me explore that a little bit. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how these two things fit together, and then talk about a project opportunity that a number of the Alliance members are considering launching, and PGE has been a part of that discussion. Next slide, please. Thank you. I know this came up in the previous discussion about just what the heck are we talking about here? What does load flexibility mean? And just to bring it all the way back, you all are familiar with the term demand response, and I heard some conversation about calling an event and having a response on the part of the participant. But what we're looking towards is how can that be not just a one-off thing, but actually something that becomes a part of the overall grid. How can an end-use device, meaning a heat pump, a water heater, a refrigerator for that matter, how can those things become part of the grid almost in the same way that a generator on the other side of the meter is a part of the grid? Today, the utility, Portland General, is competently exercising those generators. They're turning them on, turning them off as needed to meet the change in loads. And our historical work is represented in the upper right-hand corner of this slide, where we have focused on energy efficiency, which would take that change in load over the day, over the course of the day, and just shove it down. The more efficient we are, we just kind of reduce the energy need for that refrigerator, water heater, heating system. We just move it down sort of all day long, no matter what the time is. But now with the changing grid needs, as it turns out, there are some parts of the day where it's more significant to think about shifting things. So in the middle of the graph on the right-hand side of the slide, demand flexibility means, well, what if we could take our water heater, for example, and heat up all the water we need, let's say in the middle of the night when the grid is actually able to provide that through renewable energy sources and at a lower cost than it would in the middle of the day, let's say. And so we load up our water heater in the middle of the night, and then it's used all day long. And we make sure that it's off during that period when the power grid is struggling to keep up as the sun goes down and the solar resources are diminishing. And so what you see there in that little blue dip at the top of the curve there is now that's shaved off. That peak load is now shaved or reduced because we were able to take the load and push it over to the early morning hours before we started using hot water. So that's demand flexibility just by itself. So we could do that without any efficiency at all. We could just say, let's just change the time of use. But then the bottom that you see there with a red square around it is the benefit of combining efficiency and load flexibility at the same time, because now we're not only able to shift the loads, but we're able to reduce the intensity of those loads in both periods. So during the middle of the night, we can load that water heater up, but because it's a lot more efficient as a heat pump water heater, it costs less to do that. And then it's even less intensive on the peak hours to begin with, and shifting it has an even more beneficial impact on the grid if we combine those things. And then lastly, from a consumer perspective, I'm going to see probably the biggest benefit in terms of my own economics from the efficiency capture. So a heat pump water heater is 50% more efficient than a traditional electric resistance water heater. I'll see that benefit day in and day out through the cost of heating water reduced by that 50%. And then there's an additional benefit that I'll see if PG is able to move that resource around in terms of lowering the cost of operating the electric system. But that benefit to me as a consumer may not be as large as, and probably isn't right at the moment, it's not as large as just the benefit of having the efficiency by itself. But the two together optimize the overall benefit to me as a customer paying rates to PGE. And over the long run, it's going to create a more resilient, economic, and efficient and environmentally sustainable grid over the long run if we can do this together. Wow, so that's a lot I just put on there, but that's what we mean by load flexibility. And so in the interest of time, I'm just going to roll forward. Happy to answer questions kind of as we get towards the end. Next slide, please. So, and I throw this picture up here. This is actually a Lawrence Berkeley National Lab study for the Western grid. But on the Western grid, that little blue line you see there is if we are able to do load flexibility plus efficiency on the Western grid in the wintertime, it's worth 5 gigawatts of winter peak load reduction. That's very substantial. Because that means that the markets which generate the prices for electricity that PGE has to buy if they're on the open market, and during the wintertime peak, that's when our system is under its most stress. Taking 5 gigawatts off the system will significantly reduce market pricing. So that translates directly into less cost for PGE and less cost for PGE ratepayers. Okay. Oh, thanks, Kai, for taking those questions. Okay, so that's just to let you know that if we could get this done, it's a really big deal. Next slide. Okay, so that's load flexibility and plus efficiency. That's efficient, flexible loads. But then why NEEA? And NEEA's core work in efficiency has been facilitated using a tool called market transformation. So what's so important about that, and what is it? And market transformation is basically using what I'll call the leverage and power of markets that do things for their own interest, and getting those interests aligned with our energy efficiency and load flexibility needs, so that the market interest will actually capture and drive adoption of efficient, flexible loads for their own reasons, so that we can take ratepayer dollars to help start this process, but ultimately we want the market to carry it forward on its own. And we have demonstrated the power of this over the last 25 years at NEEA in a whole range of things like appliances, clothes washers, dryers, refrigerators, light bulbs, motors, industrial processes, commercial building design. We've used this a tactic of market transformation to accomplish things where now it's business as usual for refrigerators to be more efficient because they've incorporated technologies into them, and now it's just that's the way we do things. And so why is this so significant? Well, if we're going to do flexible loads as an alternative to building out generating resources, we have to take the small benefits from each refrigerator, clothes washer, heat pump, water heater, ductless heat pump. We have to aggregate those up across the millions of these devices that exist on the grid today. So we have to get to scale somehow quickly. Well, every day, or I should say every year in the Northwest, there's hundreds of thousands of water heaters sold each year. And there are equally hundreds of thousands of other appliances, clothes washers, dryers, refrigerators sold each year. Buildings are built in the tens of thousands each year. So those purchase decisions are already being made and money is being spent on those things. So if we can attach our needs for efficient, flexible loads to those decisions already being made, then we get to scale very quickly. Similarly, if we can incorporate our efficient, flexible loads as an incremental add to what's already being built, then the cost to us and to the end consumers and to the grid are lowered substantially. A great example of that is a heat pump water heater has built-in controls. Many of them come with communications capability already built in now. So in order to make that a grid-enabled device is a very small lift at the time of manufacture. In some cases, it's literally just a software change. And so because all the other stuff is already there to tell the water heater to do something during a certain time of day, with a certain amount of energy intensity, that capability is already built into the water heater for its own purposes. If we can just say, oh, by the way, if the grid needs to do something with you, could you do this? And the water heater can respond. So the incremental cost for that can be quite small ultimately if we do it at the time of manufacture or construction of a new building, or a purchase or a purchase or practice of building operations, for example. So and market transformation also works on, as I said, making this business as usual. So a key thing that we work on is standards. The manufacturing world and the communication world work off of standard protocols you see there. And that enables, once we establish a standard protocol, then all the manufacturers and all the other parties involved align around that, and that creates economies of scale that lower cost to everyone and increase the rate of adoption. And then I mentioned this already, but market transformation has been working on energy efficiency for a long time. And the value proposition for energy efficiency is pretty straightforward. People understand it, and it's big. If we can combine that with load flexibility, then we have essentially a dual purpose product that has an even stronger value proposition for both load flexibility and energy efficiency now combined into one product. Lastly, NEEA's work in market transformation, part of what we do as a Northwest Alliance is that we aggregate all 4 states and we leverage that market demand in discussions with national market actors. And again, over the last 25 years, we've demonstrated that even though we're only 5% of the US market, it actually has a significant ability to capture the attention of the decision makers at national scale. So if we can get together in what we need, then we can have a much greater chance of influencing those manufacturing decisions. Next slide, please. Okay. So now with all that backdrop, I mentioned that a number of Northwest Alliance members have been seeing the need for for flexible loads as a response to grid needs. And they have asked NEEA to think about what NEEA could do using the tool of market transformation to increase the adoption of flexible loads. How could we get more flexible loads into the marketplace? They've asked us to develop a portfolio of different projects around that. And Portland General has been a key member in those discussions, rallying the other utilities in the region around this concept. And so NEEA has put together a starting project for 2 years to help bring the region together to explore this idea and then ultimately build out a long-term 5-year portfolio of projects, which are represented on the slide here. The initial startup project is the 2 years that are in the green there. And then the 5-year project would ultimately be starting in 2025, hopefully extending through the period of 2029 to get this efficient, flexible end-use loads project launched in a way that is rapidly benefiting both PGE and the Northwest region. And the whole idea here, as you see on the right-hand side, is that because of the work we're already doing with these manufacturers on efficiency, we can leverage those conversations and talk about load flexibility as an additional value for our region, our utilities, and for those manufacturers, this is an additional opportunity for them. And we also conduct market research on all kinds of things in the region already. So this is an incremental cost to NEEA's members that includes PGE through Energy Trust. So we believe that there's a near-term opportunity to launch something, get started, and begin transforming the market to be more flexible for grid needs. Next slide, please. So we've identified 4 different projects to get started next year. And we're talking with utilities across the region to get this going. And the first one is simply, as I mentioned, it's a collaboration exercise to bring all the utilities who are interested in this together determine what should be in that longer term, large scale portfolio of flexible loads. This is a thing that NEEA does all the time for the region with our core funding to get that done. So this is already happening in our conversations around this first project, but so there will be information sharing across utilities as a part of this. It will also be an opportunity for specialized working groups who have a specific interest, let's say in flexible heat pump water heaters, to get very deep technically and to work on the integration with the grid. This will facilitate that. And it will also help us to align and aggregate our 4-state area as represented to the market. Next slide. We have a second project that is going to be focused on, so we already have some grid flexibility capable or enabled devices. And the picture that you see on the screen here is a heat pump water heater. Due to work that NEEA has already been doing with our partners in the region, in Oregon and Washington, currently every electric water heater sold in both states has grid enabled capability built into the device. So these devices are being installed today, and every time an electric water heater goes in, the opportunity exists for us to now that the device is capable, if we can connect them, we have to install a communications device that enables them to communicate with grid operators, but we can do that. It's a simple plug-in module. If we can get those installed at the time of manufacture or perhaps at the time of installation, and we do it at scale, we should be able to lower the cost of connecting them. And we also need to demonstrate with the grid operators like Portland General's distribution operations team. We need to begin to explore how can we best most efficiently engage this device to support grid needs at Portland General Electric. And as you see there, part of what we want to do is field testing and begin to work with distribution operators so that we can explore how these things can work most effectively. And we're also going to explore with manufacturers, in particular of space heating equipment, how they can integrate the same type of controls that we have in water heaters into their space heating equipment. Heat pumps in particular, we're interested in because it's an efficient device. We want to be able to explore how we can move things around. And one concept that I wanted to, looks like Samantha's about to flag me on time, I bet. Okay, I see it, Samantha. I'll be done in just a second. One concept I just want to throw out here before I end is that we're looking to exercise these devices not just 6 times a year due to peak needs on the grid, but to engage it actively every day, perhaps. When it's not being used for heating water and there's plenty of extra hot water available, perhaps we could reduce its energy use during that time period. Or perhaps if it's needing to heat water, but it's normally just chugging along at a low level and there's a big wind event where we could capture that extra renewable energy, we could activate the device rapidly and have it rapidly load up to take advantage of that wind resource. So I just want to put that out there that we're thinking of this device not as just a peak load management device, but something that's actually exercised maybe even on a daily or hourly basis in order to support grid needs and opportunities. Okay, next slide. Just real quick, we're also going to do market research, secondary market research, but we understand, as you heard earlier today from Ben, that customer engagement is absolutely critical to the success of this. If we're going to get there, we need large participation rates. And unfortunately, traditional DR programs have fairly low participation rates, like 10, 15% is considered good for a lot of DR programs across the country. But if this is going to be an effective resource for the utility, we're going to have to see 75, 80% participation rates to be meaningful. So understanding what are best practices for customer engagement is going to be a key thing, and that's what we're going to do with this project. And we'll identify gaps for future research in that longer term portfolio. Lastly, next slide. We think that one of the consumer products or products, if you will, in the conventional sense, a vehicle in a sense is just a big product from our perspective. And one of the biggest opportunities we think in this flexible load arena is, in fact, electric vehicles. And electric vehicles are not always being driven. And so they have batteries that are sitting there that could be engaged by the grid to support grid needs. And this is often called vehicle to grid opportunities. And so we think there's a big opportunity for a demonstration of vehicle to grid through the engagement of electric school buses. There's a lot of great community benefits around electric school buses, and the Federal Environmental Protection Agency is providing funding to convert electric school buses. So there's a lot of near-term opportunities here. What we'd like to do is demonstrate in utility systems and grid operations how electric school buses as a demonstration vehicle can demonstrate how vehicle to grid can support grid needs. Okay, that's our fourth project, and I think that's my last slide. Next slide. Oh yes, so I just want to give you a sense of timing. We're in discussion now with Portland General and other utilities in the Northwest to figure out exactly what the scope of this startup 2-year project period looks like in terms of budget and activities. And we are hoping to develop contracts with folks and get started Q1 of next year. With that, I think I'm done with my presentation. And Samantha, I don't know if I have time for questions or not, but I want to hand the baton back to you. Sorry for the words.
I believe the next presenter is at 11:30, right? Kai, sorry.
Yes.
So we have a few minutes if you have questions for Jeff. There is a question in the chat, but I think it might be more pointed to PGE, and we are looking for someone to answer that. You don't want me to. I am not a technical person. So I just wanted to acknowledge, Phil, we are working on trying to answer your question or locate someone who can answer that.
I've got it. Sorry.
Oh, thank you.
I was just typing it in. I was typing a response for you, Phil, in the chat, but I couldn't explain. We have tested connected equipment, like especially we have tested water heaters in particular with Wi-Fi. And the trouble we had is that sometimes Wi-Fi connection will drop, and then we need the customer to go back and reconnect the device to the Wi-Fi. And often customers don't even know that their device has dropped off the Wi-Fi. And then we have trouble with latency of instructions to the device. Data feeds back to us, and then how the device responds. So when we work with a Wi-Fi module, we often can't receive the same sort of services from the water heater. Sometimes we'll get a load drop from the water heater for several hours at a time, but there are many other sort of energy services that the water heater could provide, which Jeff was sort of alluding to, which is to heat up the water or not heat the water at all for short periods of time to provide support for the grid for sort of fast energy services or energy services that are needed in short periods of time. So we have found that the internet connection is not the best. Radio. So there are devices that have used radio in the past. Since the 1970s. Radio has been in place in other jurisdictions. I know Idaho has a radio-based program for their home air conditioners. Virginia used to have a program that used radio for home air conditioners. The problem we have with radios is it's a one-way control. So we would send a signal and hope that the system responds. Cell phone is radio. So yes, we have looked into, and we prefer to use a cell phone chip in the device, because then we do get the response time and the uptime that we're looking for.
Thank you, Jason.
Welcome.
Don't know if we have any more questions, but feel free to email us and we can get you connected with Jeff, if that's okay. If you have questions about his presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat, or again, I will plug our Learning Lab email box if you have questions later. So now we're going to move into our final presentation, which is Jacob Goodspeed about our community-based renewable energy project, or however we want to call it. We're trying to find a name. So, right, Jacob?
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks, Samantha. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. So I'll pass it to you. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, Jeff.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, great. Good morning. My name is Jacob Goodspeed. I am joined this morning by my colleague, Stacia Brownell, and we are on a team of PGE that thinks about the clean energy resources that we will need to acquire to meet House Bill 2021's 2030, 2035, and 2040 decarbonization targets that will culminate with us operating a zero carbon system in 2040. So part of that work is also thinking about the community-based renewable energy projects that were identified in our resource plans, and how PGE will begin the process to co-develop those with communities and pursue identifying and ultimately acquiring those projects. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide if we can. So this is a little bit of us circling back. So we came to this group last fall, I think in October and November, and identified how exactly the concept of utility acquisition works in other forums. I think that we talked about kind of what a request for proposals is and how that reaches out and kind of sees what's in the market. Some of the feedback that we have heard since then is that folks are hoping that PGE will be a bit more flexible and a little bit more iterative in our approach, rather than just a traditional request for proposals. So we wanted to discuss that today and think about the ways in which we are planning to build kind of a community-centric, co-developed process, and how to have that be iterative. And really the approach that we have in mind and the discussion that we want to tee up today is around how we approach that process, right? I think that there's an understanding that there may be barriers that exist to identifying distributed energy resources that are in communities and that provide community benefits. And we'd like to better understand what those barriers are and how PGE can play a role in overcoming those. And then we'd also like to talk a little bit about what the timeline looks like over the next few months as we look to work with communities and get this process stood up. Understanding that it likely will not just be kind of one single outreach to the market or one kind of subset of projects, but rather it will be a process that evolves over time as we seek to identify which projects provide the most benefit and how we can continue to address those barriers as they come up. Let's go ahead and go to the next one, please. Great, thank you. So our proposed approach here, as we think about immediate next steps, the first on our list is working with communities to think about how exactly a project would identify community benefit in a way that would lead to that project being identified, prioritized, and ultimately acquired. So we want to know what is it that we are wanting to target. The integrated resource plan and the clean energy plan identified kind of what that target should be from a volume perspective, and it identified 60 megawatts of projects by 2026 and about 155 megawatts of projects by 2030. I think we want to start to double click on that a little bit and say, okay, of that volume, how do we make sure that the projects that we are thinking through and identifying with communities are the ones that provide the most benefit to communities? And I think that the way that we are going to approach that work is by reaching out to communities directly to better understand their preferences and how we meet those. The next step from there could be, once we have those preferences in mind, seeing what projects are underway, and whether if that's a Venn diagram where there is some kind of overlapping area, to identify which of those projects exist that meet community preferences and what the next steps would be to acquire them. And then if those don't exist today, right, if there is kind of no overlapping Venn diagram there, it's beginning that iterative process that I mentioned to better understand why not, and what is that barrier that is preventing the project from existing and meeting the community benefit as outlined, and how can PGE be in a role that helps to make that go, helps to clear that barrier, helps to make sure that we have projects that are able to deliver to our customers and deliver that benefit to communities. And then the fourth down here is, again, noting that we expect this to be an iterative process, right? As we kind of approach this first round and have PGE and communities working to co-develop what the criteria should be, how are we evaluating, how are we identifying, then we're asking the market to respond to that. We understand that that will not be the end of the conversation. It will branch into a bunch of different paths. There may be acquisition from that first call to the market. There may need to be more targeted approaches to building capacity in communities to develop the projects themselves, if that's the potential path, to prepare the market to better respond to future versions of this, and also kind of getting that feedback from communities on what else maybe we haven't explored yet that we should moving forward. Okay, let's move to the next one, please. So let's just talk about a potential timeline, knowing that this will be variable and this will be driven by the feedback that we hear from communities and community members. But we're hoping to begin this co-development process immediately. We'd like to begin moving on this 60 megawatt, 150 megawatt target. It's a little bit of a process. Once we do identify those projects, the projects will have to be constructed and to come online. So we see value in beginning these conversations now, in understanding what preferences communities have from a benefits perspective, and then beginning to prepare the market to respond to what those preferences are, and beginning to prepare kind of all three of the parties at the table here, PGE, communities, and folks who engage in project development, for how this will evolve moving into the future.
Hey, Jacob, you've
We'll
got
pause
a
here.
question on the chat.
Yeah. I was going to read
Yeah.
it.
Great
So
question.
we have,
Please do. Thanks.
I want to read it because we have folks who will be viewing this recording later. So the question is from Kyle. What is the entry point / process for community to enter that approach?
Good question, Kyle. I think it'll be a little bit of a multi-step process for us to make sure that we are encouraging folks to participate, make sure that we are kind of making this opportunity known for folks who would like to participate. So I think that it will be a little bit outreach from PGE to the municipalities and communities that we serve, kind of seeking recommendations from them for who should be helping us guide this work. I think that we also are interested in feedback from this group, right? How do we make sure that we are seeking feedback appropriately and having the right folks at the table as we co-develop this process? And then I think, if there are kind of other paths that we should consider, other communities that we should be reaching out to, I think that that's feedback that we would welcome, and yeah, would be grateful for.
We also have a question from Nikita. What does prepare the market mean?
Really great question. So as we think about project development, it's a little bit of a lengthy timeline, right? Folks who historically plan, develop, construct, and then ultimately deliver these projects, they need to find sites to put the projects. They need to begin a process to interconnect to PGE system. they may have to kind of acquire use of the land to actually site the resource. And then, we'll ask them once that project is sufficiently advanced to bring that to us for the communities to review, to propose which benefits and kind of what the structure would be for that project. And then that begins a construction cycle where they actually have to get permits and go ahead and build the project. And so knowing that that can be a little bit of a lengthy process, we want to be communicating as quickly as we can in the process, in the CBRE kind of acquisition cycle, what the preferences are, right? Where would we like these to be located? What are the benefits that they should plan to bring for community review? And also to understand kind of what those barriers are. If there's something that's preventing projects from being sited and permitted and built, let's kind of together take steps to proactively address that.
I see a hand raised for Pat.
Yes, Jacob, this program to me looks like it's geared along the lines of working with professional developers who then will work with, through your guidance with the communities to make sure that the benefits and other factors that you look at are incorporated into the projects appropriately and before they proceed. And I can see why this might be the preferred approach for the first tranche of projects. But I would like you to encourage you to think about how you can engage more community-oriented developers to get engaged in this process through both technical support as well as financial support in terms of what they need to do to begin to qualify for RFPs, et cetera. And I wonder how you guys are thinking about those two different avenues.
Great point. Yeah. I think that we envision those as parallel processes. I think that we intend to pursue projects that are not an either or, but a yes and. I think, as you noted, Pat, kind of the initial, as we begin to get this scoped and begin to understand what's out there and how it could provide community benefit, I think the nearest term deliverable that we can start to move toward is understanding kind of what's in the market today, what's already being developed today, what the potential benefits are that could deliver. But we very much don't intend that to be the end of the conversation, right? I think that we, from there, want to better understand how can we work directly with communities for a more targeted approach? How can we build capacity in communities to develop and own these projects? And how can we continue to encourage professional developers who could bring benefits here close to home to continue that work? And I think, 155 megawatts by 2030 is a sizable amount of projects, and it will take a pretty multifaceted approach to make sure that we're getting there.
Great, thank you.
I want to read some questions in the chat that came in from Jenny. Thank you for the overview, Jacob. When PG talks about CBRE projects, do you have certain system sizes or system types, example given net meter, community solar, or qualifying facilities in mind?
I don't know that we have a kind of a firm thesis on that yet. I think we want to be as inclusive as we can as we begin these community conversations. I think the way it was modeled in our resource plans is that we envision community-based renewable energy projects to kind of generally be under the 20 megawatt or so threshold. But I think that our kind of initial work here is to better understand what are the benefits and locations that communities would like to see, and then kind of start to put some scope around the CBRE projects appropriately to meet that.
We also have one last question in the chat from Olivia. What geographic area is considered in the community in proximity to a CBRE project?
Yeah, good question, Olivia. I don't know that I have a firm answer on that either. I think that one might be a little bit similar, where we would really like the communities to direct us there, knowing that projects could be sited in the communities themselves, and that's kind of potentially one benefit. Or there could be projects that otherwise interconnect to the transmission and distribution system that do provide a community benefit, but that maybe aren't in the communities themselves. And I think that we are open to either or both of those approaches, but we want to make sure that we're getting this right from a benefits perspective, and would really look to our community partners to help guide us in that.
I see Michelle's hand up and we have a question in the chat. Do you want to move to the next slide and then I'll pause and get back to the questions? Or do you want to keep the conversation
Sure.
rolling? Okay, I'll get to you,
Let's go to
Michelle, next, and then
okay.
Rahana after.
Okay.
Oh, you can go, Jacob, and then I'll call on them. Sorry.
Oh, sure. Well, let's just pause here for a second. I think that this is consistent with maybe the answer to the last couple questions, which is, you know, our immediate next step is to engage with communities on what the right outcomes are and how we identify and prioritize projects to get a better sense of what the most important community benefits are. And we have a few examples on the screen. This is just kind of our first guess at what these could be. This is not necessarily what they may end up being in kind of anything that we ask the market for, but this will be kind of the space in which we are looking for guidance as we think about what projects to prioritize and acquire.
We've got a hand up from Michelle, and then
Yes.
there's a question from Pat also in the chat regarding what we mean by scholarship.
Sorry, you can ignore that question because I missed the S. It's scholarships. You would be providing scholarships for people. I mean, I understand that now. Sorry.
Michelle, you want to go ahead with your question?
Sure. So I guess I, would be inclined to agree with what I think I was hearing Pat say earlier on the previous slide. And then just hearing that comment and then looking at some of the things that are coming up in the meeting chat, I'm just wondering, like, to what extent PGE is going to utilize the feedback, the really robust feedback that's already been kind of contributed in the IRP CEP space from some of these same groups with maybe more granular levels of community, so that they can really get like a full idea of like awareness on how they can meaningfully weigh in and identify potential issues that have already been flagged that they might want to pursue further, rather than kind of like, I'm not saying this is the case, but it kind of feels like always starting from blank. And I think that it sounds like the community is getting similar senses and questions that have been contributed in the comments and IRP and CEP and previous learning labs. So like, do we ever get a chance to kind of like hear PGE like summarize this feedback, without coloring it in any sort of way with the community, so they can react to those things and say, yes, I agree with that, or like, this might be more of a priority for me?
So would that potentially be, as we start to have these community conversations, would that be something that you would like to see as like onboarding for community members to kind of have some opportunity to get up to speed on maybe what some of the conversations have been in more of this regulatory and planning space? Or I guess maybe I'll just say that we're open to feedback on how to best accomplish that in a way that feels like it's meeting the need there.
Yeah, I think that what I'm trying to get at is we're really wanting to lean towards more like transparency, accessibility, and accountability. And so we'd like to see PGE, take the feedback and kind of discuss it more broadly with community groups so that it provides multiple perspectives on these issues, rather than kind of like opportunities to like validate or question, but that they can actually like maybe hear from other folks that have different perspectives than the utility, but are also maybe more accustomed to engaging this space, like resources and dialogues that distill what's already been contributed by, advocates, other community members, other organizations like ETO or something.
Yeah, understood. I think the PGE team can take that as an action item. I think, Michelle, we'd like to follow up and kind of better understand the right way to approach that. I think it's something that we are open to. And, I think similarly, we want to make sure that as we're asking communities to help us develop this process, they are feeling informed and feeling like they're getting the full picture of knowledge that's been developed through the planning process here.
Jacob, I do want to ask, there was a question in the chat, which I do believe would be a great level set. Someone asked, what do we consider to be a community-based renewable energy project? I don't know if we define that. Like, what does that look like? So I believe that's a great question from, I hope I say your name, Rahana.
Yeah.
Just to kind of level set, like,
yeah.
what is that?
Thanks, Rihanna. Yeah, so it's defined in the legislation, and we are kind of starting broadest scope with, the definition that is in House Bill 2021. I think, generally speaking, it's a resource that can connect to either transmission or distribution, provides community benefit. I don't have the law up in front of me, so I know that there are probably some aspects of that I'm not accurately recounting, but we want to bring kind of that most zoomed out version of what is a CBRE to communities, and then look to kind of within that framework and within the body of knowledge that's been built in the CEP IRP to really begin to, if it's appropriate, focus that kind of look, or that call for CBRE more if we want a more targeted outcome, or to keep it broad if we want to kind of see what all is out there and what is possible. So we haven't developed a definition of CBRE that's kind of outside of House Bill 2021, and we expect that to be the starting point in the community conversations. And I think if we can, Samantha, Stacia and I actually, knowing that this is kind of a dialogue process, and we're hoping to have, we're grateful for the robust conversation and hoping to continue that. I think we actually have some questions for the group today too, and kind of as we continue to think about how we approach this work and kind of do that in a way that makes most sense.
I just want to say, so if we don't get to your questions all today in the chat, because I know Jacob wants to ask you all questions, it is being recorded, our note taker, and we will circle back to you all if we're not able to answer everything. But I want to give Jacob the opportunity to ask his question to the group. The time for you all and Stacia.
Great, thanks, Samantha. I think maybe first question for us is, we have gotten a lot of feedback through the CEP IRP process. I know that when we came and spoke to this group back in the fall, there were some kind of programmatic suggestions that, that maybe we align with certain resource types like community solar or certain kind of funding models. I think we're curious is, we have a lot of expertise on this call from folks. Where else have you seen this done well? Kind of as we think about potential community-based renewable energy resources, where should we be looking? Who should we be talking to? And kind of what is the lit review that you would encourage PGE to embark on, kind of simultaneous with community conversations in advance? Kind of what should we bring to those community conversations? I think that we are kind of eager for any direction there, if you feel like there's something we should be seeing.
You can drop those in the chat, or you can vocally share if you want to raise your hand.
Hi, this is Nikita. I'm sure you're all probably already looking at this, but the September small scale and community-based renewable energy project study that that HB 2021 directed ODO, Oregon Department of Energy, to release in consultation with like a work group might yeah, probably something you're looking at already, or have that's informed your planning for this, but might be a good place to start too.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think, yeah,
We'll
I think,
refresh our reading on that.
yeah, I need to as well. And thinking back on work group meetings, I feel like we had a lot of good discussions about benefits to communities. And I think, yeah, I think something that we talked about was just like all communities are different and all of them have different, different needs and priorities and preferences, and yeah, I think thinking about benefits in a more holistic way is helpful in understanding that the process for gathering community input and data will differ from each community.
If I could jump in and just really try and kind of pepper the creative thinking around where you all might have seen anything play out in a way that's exciting to you. So I've been, trying to catch up on all the notes. I know there's been a lot of mural boards and ideation and feedback, and we're really curious, even if the whole project or whole approach wasn't something that captured everything that you wanted, if there's other utilities, other states, other communities where you've seen any aspect of a community benefit come to life, where you've seen or read or heard about really robust collaboration, really meaningful results coming out in any way, or where you've seen this attempted and where it fell short, where there were unintended consequences. I and Jacob are totally motivated to reach out to these folks and interview them and learn more about the application and how to actually follow through with these ideas that we have and these principles that we are using to kind of guide North Stars to make sure that we are all really successful. So any idea, small, anything that you've seen, it would be amazing.
Looks like someone's recommending New Jersey and New Mexico, which we kind of heard about yesterday. So thank you, Olivia. I do want to encourage folks, if you have interest in this topic, CBREs, community-based renewable energy, we're going to take a list of folks. You could drop your name in the chat, or it may be easier to email us at learninglabs@pgn.com. and maybe put CBRE in the title. If you're interested in learning more about this and being a potential kind of collaborator, I guess. Or if you have other ideas about what's Jacob and Stacia were speaking to, I'll put our email in there. Thank you, Paul. Paul says, I would encourage seeking to understand less formalized community projects, ideas, brainstorms, dreams, hopes, wish lists. I think we're at time. So I know we weren't able to get to everything today, but I want to pass it over to my colleague Kai, who's going to kind of do our closing remarks, but I want to thank Stacia and Jacob for speaking today. This is not the last conversation about CBREs. It sounds like we may need to have a dedicated, probably learning lab all about CBREs. So maybe that's in our future. But again, I want to thank all the presenters for speaking today. And then Kai will probably do so, but I'll pass it over to you, Kai.
All right, I'll try to keep it short and sweet as we are at the top of the hour. First of all, thank you all for making the time. I know everybody's schedules are quite busy, and we do really appreciate this engagement. We do hear all of your questions, and I've captured several of them that we will follow back with you on. Phil, you had some concerns about the term grid enabled, preferring utility controllable. We will circle back with you on that. Ben, if you could also circle back with Philip on the understanding for further understanding of the why flex load is important, that we distill that message down as we're engaging with customers. And then Anjanette, we will circle back with you on additional understanding of any hiccups that we've seen with flex load programs thus far. And Janelle, we hear your comment about the flex load customer journey geared to customers already interested, and how do we engage that next step, the majority, those who may not have a home ownership path or are not comfortable with that work, or not comfortable with the technology. And then Jenny, you had a question about when we talk about CBRE. I think we addressed the sizes, but Jacob, if you could circle back on the types of projects that we consider CBRE. And then also Michelle had a question about how we're acting upon the feedback, and making sure that that's not restated just from PGE's point of view. So these are all really good. These are all really good pieces of feedback. I'm not going to speak to the next steps and closing remarks in detail. You can see the items that we've got, the meetings that we've got upcoming, and the planned filing dates that we've got. We will be holding this next Learning Lab on September 7th. And you can see down below the references to meeting materials and dockets in which we're doing these presentations. So I do just again want to say thank you to everyone. These are rich discussions. We didn't expect to address all the issues here, but if we're farming those issues, we will circle back with you with some props. So I will leave it at that. Thank you very much for everyone, and take care.